second wave of women's movement it roughly starts in about 1960, and I'm saying roughly because that assumes that there wasn't anything going on between 1920 and 1960, which isn't the fact. So women got the right to vote, and then you've got the Depression in 1930, and then you also have World War II. During World War II, because men went out to war, women went to the factories to work. What's interesting about that is that at the time, there was support for child care. While women worked in the factories, the government did support child care, which is unfortunate that we don't have that now and as much ease as it was during that time. When the men came back from war, the women were relegated back into the household. Okay, so around the 1960s, we have kind of the notion of the feminine mystique. Betty Friedan wrote this book about the problem that had no name. And so the issue is about women being at home, middle-class women, white to middle-class women in particular, feeling depression. And part of the issue was because they were at home and not kind of relegated to work. And so there was conflicts about what they were feeling in terms of being fulfilled at home. You also have kind of approaching the 1970s women's liberation movement. So what is it that women were still kind of fighting for? Their right to be a part of social movements, their right to be in the workforce as well, and not undermined for their abilities to contribute to the workplace. You also have kind of a clearer distinction between feminist activism and feminist academics. So you can't talk about women's movement without talking about feminism. And so you're starting to see during that second wave the emergence of different definitions of academic feminists. So you have Marxist feminists who are interested in really addressing class within an academic environment. Okay, you also have definitions of what would be considered separatist feminists, of what would be considered lesbian feminists, liberal feminists, as well as cultural feminists, revalorist feminists. So basically, what all of these different forms of feminism are addressing is making arguments about when we're talking about women's rights, we can't ignore issues of class, we cannot ignore issues of race, sexuality, okay, or even disability. So you have feminists who are in the academy, who are wanting to incorporate a feminist perspective in theoretical work. And then you also have feminist activists who are out in communities, really working toward making sure that women, for instance, have adequate health care in their communities. Then you have some feminists who are activists and academics. Jeannie Ludlow, who's the director of women's studies, kind of is coming from that second wave of feminism, and she is both an activist and an academic, and a lot of her work centers around abortion rights. So that leads us into, and then a key phrase for the second wave is the personal is political, so that we can't make distinctions between what's happening in the private sphere of the home as separate from what's happening in the public. So a big issue also was concerns about domestic violence and making sure that women were receiving the adequate support that they deserve.